Hey guys, and welcome back to Battlefront updates and some huge Death Star news. Tonight they've revealed pretty much everything about the DLC and I'm not really sure where to start. We now have details on the star cards, blasters, hero abilities, vehicles, maps, as well as about 1 minute of cinematic footage ripped from the website where we can see most of this in action. I'm gonna try to go over everything quite quickly so this video don't end up being 30 minutes long, but buckle up because here we go. Let's start off with the new blasters and star cards, as we didn't know about those previously. In terms of blasters, the cool thing is that both of these two new blasters are actually from the Jedi Knight games, something which you may recognize. I have to admit that I've never played those games, but I was told by Christian that they were actually from those games, and I also noticed that a lot of people on Reddit noticed that as well. Anyways, the first new blaster is the TL-50 Heavy Repeater, a weapon that according to its description sends a storm of bolts and can also gather its energy into a devastating concussion blast. This sounds like a really cool weapon and I hope it's gonna be a high fire rate weapon that I will actually like, as I'm not a huge fan of high fire rate weapons in general. This also sounds like the first weapon that will have a secondary fire feature due to that concussion blast ability. The second blaster is a pistol called the K-18 Briar Pistol, and this is actually Kyle Katarn's weapon, which up until now has not been canon, and it's so cool to see them add in new blasters like this. According to the description, it can discharge the entire heat source in one powerful blast. That makes me think that this is also a weapon that has two firing abilities, the main semi-automatic mode that Christian mentioned on Twitter, but also the charge up that is mentioned in the post here. I have to admit that I wasn't sure on how they could actually come up with any more interesting blasters, but they obviously proved me wrong and I can't wait to try them out. Moving on to the star cards. The first one is actually quite funny, as I speculated about it in a video a while back, and it's the medical droid that you may remember from the old Battlefront games. In this game it will apparently be stationary where you place it out, and it will periodically provide healing to everyone around it, as well as boost the star card recharge rate, which I'm assuming works similar to how partners or objectives do. The second star card is also very interesting, as it's a laser Tripmine which probably works as it sounds. If you pass the laser it blows up. But the description also mentions that it has a built-in scrambler, something which is also new to the game and will probably provide some very interesting tactical opportunities for the player. Next up we have the vehicles, which you already know about, but I thought I'd show them anyways, which is Luke's Red 5 X-Wing as well as Vader's TIE Advanced. If we move on, we have the hero abilities as well as our first glimpse of the two new heroes. Let's start off with Chewie. He is apparently pretty slow compared to the other rebel heroes, but he does have a higher health and armor, making him into a tank. His trait is called Furious Firing and is based entirely around his bowcaster. At trait level 1 his bowcaster will only fire one bolt at a time, but it won't be like the infantry bowcaster because he doesn't need to charge it up. For each trait level he will shoot one more bolt, meaning that at the max trait level he will fire 4 bolts at once. But his first ability works together with his trait, as it is called multi-bolts, and when you activate it you will shoot twice as many bolts as you normally would. So if you are at trait level 4, that means that you will be shooting a whopping 8 bolts at once, which as you can understand will cause absolute mayhem. His second ability is called Might Roar, and when he uses that all nearby teammates will get the Berserker trait level 3 buff for a short period of time, as well as very high armor. Chewie will also gain extra damage and armor during this buff, and fellow heroes will get the armor buff but not the damage buff. Lastly, he has an ability called Ground Slam, which sends out a shockwave around Chewie which damages enemies in a large area. This is supposed to compensate a bit for his slow speed and give him a better reach. I can totally see Chewbacca absolutely destroying in close quarters maps thanks to his bowcaster rampage and Ground Slam. But next up we have Bossk. He is equipped with a Relba V10 and is quite a bit faster than Chewie. He is a hero that is hard to get rid of because his trait is called Trandoshan Regeneration, which means that every time you kill an enemy you will regenerate a percentage of your health, and the higher trait level the more you will regenerate. This sounds like it could either be really awesome or very overpowered, and hopefully they have balanced it well. His first ability is Micro Grenades, and when he uses that ability, his Relby switches into Micro Grenade mode, and each shot will then shoot a micro explosive that will detonate after a short time or with contact with enemies. This is the type of ability that will be able to absolutely destroy enemies in close quarters combat. I can imagine that it's going to be like the Barrage star card, but the difference is that you will be able to fire a lot more Micro Grenades with Bossk's version. His second ability is called Predatory Instincts and is very interesting as it is actually a toggleable ability with no cooldown. When you activate it, you will get heat vision, faster cooldowns, increased damage and increased sprinting speed. This will turn him into a true predator. The downside of having it on though is that enemies and teammates might look the same and kind of blend together, and on top of that they mention as a developer tip that he will be extremely sensitive to flashbangs when he is using this ability, so I can imagine that they will be a great counter against him. His final ability is Toxic Escape, and when he uses this ability he will leap in the air towards the direction he was moving and drop a highly toxic Deoxys grenade behind him. This Deoxys grenade will be a lot bigger and stronger than the normal one, so I can imagine it will do quite a lot of harm in a corridor or any other location where it's hard to escape it. That is all the new details we have from the blog posts on the website, but if we take a look at the map section of the blog post, we can learn that the DLC will contain 5 maps in total, and since there's 1 map at the Star Destroyers and 1 for the Trench Run, I'm guessing it's gonna be 3 inside of the Death Star. If we take a look at this footage rolling in the background, we do get some good details on what we can expect from those maps. The first few seconds gives us a great glimpse of the first phase in the Battle Station game mode, showing us the Star Destroyer and asteroids that we will be playing around. Moving on, we have the hangar that was shown in the initial concept art, and that is most likely a part of one of the indoors maps. They also show us this control room from inside the Death Star, but it's hard to say which ones out of all of these environments that will be on the same maps. This part of the Death Star might be my favorite, because it looks just like in the original Battlefront 2, and I'm so glad that they're actually playing on our nostalgia when making these maps, and I can't wait to see how it feels in game. Here is another control room-ish place with a protocol droid standing at the table. That's probably just for cinematic effect though, and I doubt it will affect the gameplay. We also get our first glimpse of the surface of the Death Star and the Trench Run, which actually looks a lot more interesting than in the New Hope, as there's different types of environments down in the actual trenches. So the Trench Run will probably not just be a simple trench you go straight forward in. This is what looks like a trash compactor, shortly followed by a room full of astromech droids. I wonder if these will actually affect gameplay or just be part of the background. Lastly, we get to see this beautiful view from the viewport on the Death Star of the so far unknown planet. Some people speculated Geonosis and others thought it might be a planet from Rogue One, but I don't think it's any of those actually. We'll simply have to wait and see. One thing is for sure though, with all the environments shown in this video, they have really covered every aspect of the Death Star plus some more, which is cool to see. I was afraid everything would look the same in the Death Star, but it seems like that is not the case. But well, that wraps up this video, a ton of details to go over, and hopefully I didn't miss anything major. There's still plenty of more to go over, but I will leave that for later in the week. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to drop a like and some feedback below. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, may the Force be with you.